How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Daled, Daf 34 of Masechta Avodah Zarah. Friends, your friends. Today's Daf, it starts out with this interesting anecdote, incident kind of thing with a few interesting halachas, in my opinion. And then we continue, I think this was a Daf like this yesterday, maybe, I can't remember, maybe the day before, where we had a long mishnah on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis, and we are just going to continue going through the next items in the mishnah. What is interesting is that by the end of the Daf, we are segueing into the discussion about cheese. Very interesting, referring to the cheese of the Kochavim. Of course, we know about Yenesach, Stein Yenam. We don't drink wine from of the Kochavim. There's also a halacha of not to eat non-kosher cheese. What is it about non-kosher cheese? So, I think that the main discussion of that is really we're going to get into tomorrow, but we're starting to segue into that. And then one more thing that I'll say after this, related to my just now. And then, what was I saying? So we are segueing into the cheese discussion, and tomorrow we're going to continue on that. Also tomorrow, discussing bread and, not eating bread belonging to, well, not necessarily not eating it, but the discussion about bread baked by non-Jews. So interesting things. This leads to the next thing that I want to say. I would like to try and say less. So that's another thing that is on my mind. So where I would normally say you might hear me not knowing what to do a little bit. But I think it might be like one step back, two steps forward. Hopefully it won't be that big of a deal. See, I just caught myself there. I was about to say I spared me and all of us. So I hope that it won't take too long and I'll just kind of get the hang of it. But for maybe the next, I just caught one there also. So it might just take a few days of getting used to, but hopefully it'll be better afterwards. So without further ado, we are going to start Daf Lamed Daled of Masechta Avodah Zarah. Okay. So we are going to start on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, about somewhere between, but I feel like that I think was that was just kind of thinking kind of thing, not like a kind of thing. We'll figure it out. So we're going to start in Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, about 5 or 10 lines in or so, where it says Rabbi Akiva ikla Ginzak. Very interesting. Let us start there. Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, about 5-10 lines in. Rabbi Akiva ikla Ginzak. Rabbi Akiva visited Ginzak. But they asked him 3 kashas, and he didn't know the answer to the 3 kashas. So he went to the Beis HaMedrash and he asked. Now, Tosfos Taka points out that this same anecdote appears in Masechta Tainis on Daf Yud Aleph, and there it is not Rabbi Akiva, it is Mar Ukva. Over there it is Mar Ukva who visits Ginzak. And there, and Tosfos quotes Rashi from Masechta Tainis, where he points out that the girsa of Mar Zutra is a better girsa because it doesn't seem right that Rabbi Akiva would not know these things. So, very interesting. Yeah, Rashi also quotes another thing which Tosfos rejects, but anyways, interesting that this same anecdote is also in Masechta Tainis from Mar Ukva, Rashi, and Tosfos also points out that Rashi sounds like Tosfos would agree as well, that probably the better version is Mar Zutra, Mar Ukva, but we will, with that in mind, we will simply read the girsa that we have. So again, Rabbi Akiva ikla Ginzak. Rabbi Akiva visited Ginzak Ba'omine, and they asked him, Mis'an in the shows or ein Mis'an in the shows? Interesting. Can you do a partial fast or not? Lo hava biyadeh. Why? And he didn't know the answer if you could do a partial fast or not. Why is this interesting? For one reason why it's interesting is because today is the day after Shivasa B'Tammuz, and I was learning this up yesterday on Shivasa B'Tammuz about fasts. That was interesting. Why else is it interesting? Well, what exactly is this partial fast? So Rashi explains this partial fast as, well, what if it's the afternoon? What if it's 2 in the afternoon? Happens to be today. I didn't eat anything today. What time? It's like 5:30 in the afternoon. I didn't eat anything today. Today is a good example. Actually, it's not, because I drink coffee and water and stuff. So say a person didn't eat until the middle of the afternoon, but I really only ate today at about maybe 3 in the afternoon. I think I ate my first food. So let's say a person didn't eat or drink anything until, let's say, 3 in the afternoon, and he decides, hey, I haven't eaten anything today. How about this? 3 in the afternoon, shkia, or at the end of the day, let's say 7, 8 o'clock. You know what? Let me just fast the rest of the day. And today will be a fast day. It'll be a good thing. I'm gonna fast today. For whatever reason he wants to fast, he says, okay, today's gonna be a fast day. The shayla is, does it count as a fast day? Does he get credit, so to speak, for fasting? For whatever credit he wants to get. Also, interestingly, can he say Anenu? And in Shema Tefillah at Mincha, can he say Anenu? So Rashi explains that this is what it means, Misan in the shows. Doesn't just mean that, like, can I fast for an hour here, an hour there. That's not what it means. It means that if a person already more than halfway through the day realizes that he hasn't eaten yet, can he start his fast, well into the day? And would that count as a fast? Tosfos Taka quotes the Yerushalmi that actually, even just, you can actually simply say, I'm just going to fast for a few hours. What does Tosfos say? Shem ochel ad chatzi hayom. Right. It was before we started the shows. Shem ochel ad chatzi hayom. Even if he did eat, 3 lines into the wide lines of Tosfos. I'm just going to read it for a second. Yachlu ligmor b'daita lisanu zara lailo v'oslu tainis. Even if a person ate in the morning, he had a big breakfast, and in the afternoon he says, you know what? I'm just not going to eat till the end of the day. It'll be a fast. Tosfos says that would be considered misanin l'shos, quoting the Yerushalmi. Okay, so now back to our gemure. So Rabbi Akiva ikla leginzak. Bomine, they asked him, misanin l'shos, can you fast for a few hours? Okay, let's go with Rashi's pshat. I think in general. So as I'm sure you've noticed, I've been learning Tosfos recently. Mamish, it changed my life. It's changing my life. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it up. Also, I think it's been making the Babylon Talmud better. Let me know on WhatsApp what you think, if you agree. But I think learning Tosfos for me has forced me to kind of slow down and really interact with the material much better. I think just a better. I think I just feel I feel like I'm like a little bit more comfortable, kind of like going over the doc, because I've already been forced to like slow down and really work through it with Tosfos, which has been, I think it's been a net positive. What do you think? How's it been with the Tosfos? I feel like it adds like an additional layer to it, which is nice. I feel like we can interact with the content like a little bit more intimately, I feel like. Now I'm taking a break because I don't want to say But what else was I going to say? So I want to say is that I feel like generally we should kind of, our approach should be that Rashi is our pshat that we'll go with, and we'll use Tosfos for some extra layers. And therefore, misan in the shows, can you have like a partial fast? That's assumed like Rashi, from you decide you haven't eaten the whole day, and then at some point in the afternoon you decide that you're just going to finish off the day as a fast, lav biyodei. And Rabbi Akiva did not know the answer to that question. The earthenware pitchers of Ovdei Kechavim, are they permitted or are they forbidden? Okay. And Rabbi Akiva did not know the answer. Also an interesting question. What was Moshe Rabbeinu's wardrobe? What was his outfit? What was Moshe Rabbeinu wearing during the Shiva Simei HaMiluim? That, of course, the Mishkan was inaugurated on the 1st of Nisan. For the 7 days prior were the Shiva Semei Miluim. Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all of the service in the Mishkan during that time. What was his outfit? What was he wearing? Lo Ahava B'Yodei, and Rabbi Akiva did not know that either. And the assumption is that he wasn't wearing the Big Day Kahuna because the Big Day Kahuna were, right, Basisa B'Day Kodesh, the Ahar and Achicha, that the B'Day Kodesh were not for him. He's not the Kohen Gadol. The B'Day Kodesh were for, right, the Big Day Kahuna. The B'Day Kahuna were for Aharon, they were not for him. So what was he wearing? So Tosfos Taka points out, a Gemara from Zvachim, we'll get to it in the next few months, maybe about 4 or 5 months from now. This Taka Shita in the Gemara in Zvachim, that actually Moshe Rabbeinu was a Kohen Gadol Taka. So we won't get into the answer. I think the question is a more interesting question than the answer. But there is a Shita that Moshe Rabbeinu Taka was a Kohen Gadol. So maybe he was allowed to wear the Big Day Kahuna, the Big Day Kohen Gadol. Tosfos says, even so, until the Chanukah Samizbeach, the Chanukah Samishkan wasn't, he still wasn't going to wear those. But it's interesting, it's an interesting shita there, that maybe Moshe Rabbeinu Taka was a Kohen Gadol. So 3 questions. Misan in the shows, yes or no? The next question was, what's the deal with the kankanim of the Chabim? Third question, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's outfit during the Shiva Semei Hamiluim? Lav B'Yodei, right, and he didn't know the answer to these questions. Also, Shalvei V'Joshua, so Rabbi Akiva went to the Beis HaMedrash and he asked in the Beis HaMedrash, Amri, and they said, Hilchos Halacha is Misan in the shows. Yes, you can fast for several hours. V'im Hishlim, and if you succeeded to fast, Mispal Tfilas Tainis, so in Shomei Tefillah, you will say the Tefillah of Anenu, as you know from yesterday, or by the time you hear this, it will have been about a week ago, probably a little more. Behilchasa, halacha number 2 is Kankanim shel oivdei kochavim le'achar yud beis chodesh mutarin. Interesting. I believe that this is an alternative for Ivuri. We had talked about that if you have a vessel, earthenware vessel, or even a leather vessel from an Oivdei Kochavim that was used for wine, you can rinse it out 3 times over the course of 3 days, 24 with waiting 24 hours each. This seems to be an alternative, I believe, which is you could simply just leave it for 12 months, for a year. Right? What do we say? That these kankanim, if you leave them out for 12 months, then they are permitted for use. And finally, what was Moshe's outfit during the Shiva Semei Miluim? The answer is, Bechaluk Lavon, he was wearing a white garment. Rav Kahana Masni, Bechaluk Lavon she'ein bo imra. Rav Kahana says it was a white garment that did not have a hem. Why did it not have a hem? 4 reasons. 4 possibilities why Moshe's white outfit lacked a hem. The first possibility is quoted by Rashi and rejected by Rashi also, which is, he said there's a shita that maybe there was no hem on the garments and nobody should suspect him of taking any money from the trumas, from the distribution, from the contributions to the Mishkan. Maybe he chopped a few coins and put them into the hem at the bottom. Rashi says that the contributions were already over. He was busy doing the Avodah. There was no money to be taken. So Rashi raises that possibility, but also rejects it. Tosfos gives 3 possibilities. One of them is that, well, the garment that Moshe Rabbeinu was using could not have been used before. And therefore, by lacking a hem, it looked like it was brand new, just created, and it was never been used before. That's one possibility. Another interesting possibility is that, well, this is an interesting one, that if people saw that Moshe Rabbeinu was, at the very beginning, Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash for the Shiva Semei Miluim, Moshe Rabbeinu was the man. He was doing everything. And then, suddenly, he's not doing it anymore. And people could wonder, what's wrong with Moshe Rabbeinu? What happened? What did he do? Like why for the first week he was doing everything, now he's doing nothing. So in order to make it clear that this was a temporary position and that there was something unique about Moshe serving for the Shiva Samim Belurim, and that this was never intended to be a permanent position, the garment that he used, Davka didn't have a hem, so that it would be different, so that people would realize, there's something different about this whole situation with Moshe Rabbeinu doing the Avodah in the Mishkan. They won't think that anything particularly happened and that now he's not doing it anymore. The whole thing was kind of a exception to the rule. And finally, you could say Imra is like Amra, is like wool, that we learned in Masechta Yoma that the big day kahuna could have kilayim. I believe that the belt was kilayim. There was at least maybe according to one shita, but this was all wool. There was no kilayim there. Interesting shitas about why there was no hem to the white outfit that Moshe Rabbeinu was wearing during the Shiva Simei Hamiluim. Now moving on to the next part of the Mishnah. How's it been going without the ums? I feel like I've been like a little bit conscious, not like insanely conscious about it, but I feel like I've been keeping in mind to be sensitive to when I'm gonna and to not So you said I was just about to do it there. How's that? I hope that things are still going smoothly and not too mechanical. Hopefully it'll work out. The pits and the peels of the Ovdei Kochavim. In the Mishnah, Reb Meir had said that the pits and the peels are Osir Ba'ano, right? What did it say in the Mishnah? We said, what does the Mishnah say? What? Asurin v'isuran isra anoya d'Reb Meir b'chacham om lachin asurin yiveshim mutar. That was what the Mishnah had said about the pits and the peels, meaning if you have an Ovid Kochavim who is making wine, how does wine start? I think wine starts by you take a bunch of grapes and you press them. I think that's how it starts. So what is the status of those pits and peels after the grapes have been pressed? And now there's pits and now there's peels. So Meir says that those pits and peels are asurin, osur ba'ano. And the Chachamim say it depends. If they are moist, they're osur. If they are dry, they are mutter. And on that we are discussing. The rabbis taught the pits and the peels of the idolaters, lachin, or even I imagine just non-Jews, lachin asurin, if they are moist, they are osur, yiveshim mutarim, if they are dry, they are permitted. Hey ninu lachin ve'ninu yiveshin, what's considered moist and what's considered dry? Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, lachin, moist, kol yud beis chodesh. For the first 12 months, they are considered moist. Yeveshim, what's considered dry? Lachin yud beis chodesh, after 12 months. After 12 months, they're considered dry, and according to Chacham, at that point, they would be mutarin. Itmar, we said it on Rabbi Bachanam Rabbi Yechanan, kishehein asurin, when they are asurin during the first 12 months, according to the Chachamim. Asurin afilu ba'anoya. They're mamish asur, even ba'anoya, just like Reb Meir said. Just Reb Meir says they are always asur ba'anoya. The Chacham say specifically for the first 12 months, while they're moist, they're asur even ba'anoya as well, right? Just like Reb Meir had said. However, what they say though is that kishen mutarin, after 12 months, when they're considered dry, and now they are mutar ba'anoya, and now they are mutarin ba'afilu ba'achila. They are permitted not just ba'anoya, but even to eat them. You write this, for example, nevela is mutar ba'anoya, you could sell it, whatever, but you can't eat it. I just threw out an example of some of that, right? And also the examples that we have plenty of examples on Mishnah, things that you can get benefit from. For example, you could sell it, but you just can't eat it. But says Rabbi Bachana, Rabbi Yechanan, that when the Chacham say that after 12 months, these pits and peels are permitted, they're permitted even to eat at that point. Amr of Zvit says, Hi, Dordaya de Chamra, these dregs of wine, the Amar that remains, Bosser Treser Yachi, Shata, after 12 months, Shari they are permitted. It's talking machlokes Rashi and Tosfos about what these dregs are. Rashi says they are the shmarim. I think that's basically just like what's left at the bottom of the barrel, and after 12 months they get dried out and they become dry, and at that point they are mutter. Tosfos as the kasha on that Hitaka says it's some kind of mead of sorts that is made from some kind of temed, I think, right? Yeah, I think it's some kind of temed, some kind of a mead of sorts that is made with, I guess, the dregs of the wine. Okay, but after 12 months it becomes permitted. Okay. Rabbi Chaviva says, Rabbi Chaviva, Brei Derove, Hane Gulfe, these jugs, Basu Tresa Yache Shata Mutchari. After 12 months, they're permitted, like we had said earlier, right? That was one of the items that they had asked Rabbi Akiva, even though Tosfos and Rashi prefer saying it's Mar Ukva, but that was one of the items from earlier, that a jug, after 12 months, it is mutter. I think that would be an alternative to Iroi, an alternative to kind of filling up the water and letting it out. If it's been 12 months, then it is mutter. Omar Rav Chaviva says, Rav Chaviva, Hane Avta de Tayoi, these can't. So this is taka also machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. And as Rashi says, that is, let's just go with Rashi, that it is a canteen of the Arab merchants. Their canteens that I imagine were used for wine, also probably for like long distances, like a canteen you travel with. So Basar Tracy Archeshata, sorry, after 12 months it is permitted. What does Rashi say? Rashi says the Tayai Holche Drachim, those who travel, Noisin also Male Yain, they would carry it filled with wine, the Merachok far away, it's as if this is something, it's as if you're putting wine in for long-term storage. You're going on a long trip with it. That is why it would need, you can't just simply rinse it out, I imagine is the point, but you'd have to wait 12 months. I do imagine though that Eroi would be okay. Yeah, alternatively, you'd be able to rinse it out. I'd imagine, right, the 72-hour thing. I'd imagine that should also work. I think. Would anybody argue otherwise? I think that's correct. Alternatively, you could do 12 months. I do think that this 12-month waiting period is an alternative to the 72 hours of Eroi. If I'm mistaken, please let me know. Amar Vachabre de Rav Ika Hani Purtsine de Armoi Bosatresu Yarke Shata Shari. These Purtsine de Armoi, these dregs of the Arameans, are permitted after 12 months, which I think is basically kind of like similar to like the Chartzanim and Zogim. Okay, fine, Givaldi. So what did we just say? So these, like, I think these are basically like those dregs, the pits and the peels that are made of the remains. After 12 months, shari, they are permitted, like we had said, like the Chacham had said, and we had said at the beginning, right, earlier, and at the bottom of Mamdalad Amud Aleph. Rav Akiva de Rava, Amr Rav Akiva de Rava says, Rav Akiva de Rava, Hani Gulfe Shchime ve'uchme, these jugs that are red and black, Basatresi Achashat Shari, are also permitted after 12 months. Okay, fine, sounds good to me. I guess if they absorb wine and after 12 months, they are acceptable. Now, what's the base over there? No, that's okay, fine. The Mooryis. Now, moving on to Mooryis. What is Mooryis? Mooryis is, you take fish, apparently. I can't tell you exactly what Mooryis is. It's not clear. It's not like they say, like, this is what it is. They tell you how it's made. What you do is, maybe somebody knows about, maybe where somebody lives or in somebody's family or tradition, they make Mooryis. But basically, it sounds like you would take fish and take the fat from the fish, and then you would put it in some kind of brine, and like the oils and stuff would be extracted from the fat, and I guess whatever. And I think the fat was kind of the thing that you ate. Okay, sounds like an interesting thing. Anyways, so that's Mooryis. So Natanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Mooryis, Uman, a professional Mooryis, like a high quality Mooryis, mutter is actually permitted. Because what did the Mishnah say? If we flip back to the Chav Testament base, we had said on Mooryis, Ugvina space Unyukey, and the Gvina from Unyukey, which we'll get into after the Mooryis, Shalov de Kuchavim, Asurin v'Yisurin Yisur Anoid, Divrei Meir v'Chamam Ein Yisurin Yisur Anoid. So Meir says that the Mooryis is also ba'anoah. The Chacham say it's mutar ba'anoah, but also ba'achila. The Gemara now points out that if we're talking about a high-quality Mooryis, it's actually permitted. Why is a high-quality Mooryis permitted? Because Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel Omer Mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel says the name of, I think it's his brother, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, who I imagine both the brothers of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the two uncles of Rebbe. I imagine that's what we're talking about. Av chilak uman mutter. Okay. Also the chilak, professional chilak, is permitted. What's chilak? Chilak is some kind of small fish. Some kind of small fish that I think is actually born without fins and scales, but it develops the fins and scales, and my understanding is that it's a kosher fish. However, because it's a small fish, they're not sold individually. I guess something like a sardine or something. You don't just buy like one sardine, you buy a bunch of sardines. So you buy a bunch of these small fish. And even though these small fish are kosher, what ends up happening is that other small fish get mixed in with them, and you end up getting non-kosher fish, right? Non-kosher fish get mixed in with them, you end up getting non-kosher fish. But if we're talking about an uman, a craftsman, a fisherman who's top notch, well then the top notch fisherman will filter out the non-kosher fish, because he just wants to sell this chilak. And the non-kosher fish that look like chilak but aren't chilak tend to not taste as good as chilak. And therefore, this sort of professional craftsman, fisherman, will filter out any of the less desirable fish, which are also the non-kosher ones. And he'll leave the chilak there. So therefore, so even though chilak, generally, I think we're going to learn about it in the next mishnah already. Yeah, I believe it's in the next mishnah, which we're going to learn about, today. Where are we? No, tomorrow. In the next mishnah, mentions that the chilak are not allowed because of the concern for these other fish that get mixed in. But if we're talking about a high-quality fisherman or fishmonger, well, then you can buy the chilak because it will be pure, it will be only chilak, it won't be any of those non-kosher fish, which are just generally less desirable. Now, Tani Avimi Brei de Rab Abo, Avimi Brei de Rab Abo taught Mooryis umen mutter, that the Mooryis, that this high-quality Mooryis is permitted. How come? Hutani lavu amarla, he taught this and he then explained why. Because Pamrishin Vesheni Mutter Shlishi Aser, my taima Pamrishin Vesheni Dinafishum Nayu Lo Tzarich Lemir Mebu Chamra, Ikan Velech Ramu Beu Chamra. Because apparently the way that this Mooryis was made was that you would take the fat of the fish and you would put it in some kind of brine. And the first 2 times that this process was applied to the fat of the fish, it was a high quality product. It was a high quality, right? But the outcome would be high quality. And they would do this, I guess, more than 2 times. So the first 2 times, it was high quality Mooryis, and there would be no need to add any wine to it, because if the wine would actually be bad for you. The wine wasn't a desirable. When you have high quality Mooryis, you simply don't want wine in there. You don't need the wine. But you have a high quality product on its own. The wine would only be a negative addition. So therefore, you can assume that because it negatively impacts the quality of this desirable Mooryis, there is no concern about wine when we're talking about high quality Mooryis. But when you get to like the 3rd soak already, so then already the quality is not as good. You might add some wine as like a filler, or maybe at that point already, since the product is not as good, the wine actually enhances it. So at that point, you do have to be concerned about wine being mixed into the Mooryis. But if we're talking about the high quality stuff from the 1st and 2nd brines, so there's not going to be any wine in high quality Mooryis. It would be negative for the Mooryis. So let's read that again. Tanevimi breder abo going to read this again. Mooryis umin, when it comes to high quality Mooryis, mutter is permitted. And he explained, Pam rishon v'sheni, that when it comes to the first and second soaks or brines, mutter is permitted. Shlishi also, but by the third time it's already forbidden. My time how come? Pam rishon v'sheni, because the first two soaks, I guess, the nafesh shumnari, there's a lot of fat. Lo sarich l'min Rabbi Huchamer, you don't need wine. And there's actually, I think, a different girsa which says not lo sarich but lo asu, right? You're not going to put in wine. It's going to have a negative effect. But once already you get to the third soaking, Ramu B'Chamra, then they are putting in wine already. I don't exactly know what this Mooryis. Maybe what the Mooryis is that it's actually what's extracted from the fat, I guess. Maybe so you put it in this brine, and I guess fat is extracted. Maybe that's what you want. And then you have a second extraction, and it's still good. And by the third extraction, you're already using wine as like some kind of filler. I guess maybe that's what it is. Does that ring a bell, friends? Is there anything in your life that you could say like, oh yeah, that sounds like a Mooryis kind of thing? How arva de Mooryisa de osi de nemila de ako. There was a boat that contained a shipment of Mooryis that was docking at the port of Acre, the port of Akko. Also, Rav Abba de Ben Akko naturi ba'ado, and Rav Abba de Ben Akko, apparently that is not the same as Rav Abba, who we learned at the end of Masechta Ksubis that Rav Abba would kiss the stones of Akko. Rav Abba would kiss the stones of Akko. But apparently this is Rav Abba de Min Akko. Natur Bala, and he put up guards. He wanted people to keep an eye on the Mooryis to make sure, right? Because as we learned in the Mishnah, Mooryis of Ovid Kochavim is problematic. So he wanted people to keep an eye on the Mooryis so that they were hidden, keeping an eye on the Mooryis. Omar le Rava. Okay, so Rava says to Rabbi, which is interesting because why was Rava in Eretz Yisrael? So I think maybe I saw in the art school that, well, maybe Rava came to Eretz Yisrael to learn, because it used to be common that people from Bavel go to Eretz Yisrael to learn. Do we know that Rava did that? I don't know, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting idea. The Agosabach says it's Rab Abba, which is interesting, right? So meaning we had Rab Abba de Min Akko, who had said, okay, we need people to keep an eye, we need eyes on the Mooryis. And Rab Abba, the regular Rab Abba, the one who kissed the stones of Acre, he says to Abba de Min Akko, Ada Idna, Ma Natra, I don't understand. All of a sudden, like, what are you accomplishing? That all of a sudden now we're going to keep an eye on the Mooryis. Who's been keeping an eye on it until now? So Amalei Rabbi de Ben Akko responds, Ada idna l'may nechush, but until this point, what are we concerned about? And I'll tell you why. L'may nechush la imishum dema'av beichamer. What are you concerned that maybe there's wine in the Mooryis? No, there's not. I'll tell you why there's not. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any financial, no, maybe economic. Doesn't make any economic sense for them to put wine into the Mooryis, because where they come from, kista de Mooryis beluma, kista de chamra bedala lume. Where they come from, wine is 4 times as expensive as Mooryis, and it makes no sense that you would put wine in Mooryis. It sounds like, especially based on what we had said a few minutes ago, it sounds like the role of wine in Mooryis is like some kind of a filler when you have lower quality Mooryis. But where they come from, you wouldn't be using wine as a filler because it's 4 times as expensive. So therefore, says Rav Abba de Min Akko, I can sort of vouch for the fact that there is currently no wine in there, and I wanted people to keep eyes on it so that we keep it that way. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah, but says Rabbi Yirmiyah to Rabbi Dilma, I did it sur asu. But maybe they came to Eretz Yisrael, to Acre, by way of Tyre in South Lebanon. It's there to this day. Maybe this boat docked in Tyre before coming to Lebanon, before coming to Eretz Yisrael. The Shvi Chama, that there in Lebanon, in Tyre, the price of wine is similar to how it is here in Eretz Yisrael. And it's a reasonable price. So maybe they picked up some wine there and put it into the Mooryis. Omar lei, Reb Zera answers, Hasam ikulev shure ika. No, they would not have docked in Tyre because in Tyre there's like whirlpools and lots of snow that had melted into. It was rough seas there outside of Tyre, and they simply there wasn't a possibility of them docking in Tyre, so they didn't stop in Tyre. And where they came from, the price of wine is 4 times that of Mooryis. So therefore, we can assume that until now, as a present, there is no wine in the Mooryis. But from this point on, we do need to keep an eye on it, because here in Eretz Yisrael, the price of wine is acceptable, is cheaper, and we need to be concerned that there won't be wine that ends up in the Mooryis. Fine. Vigvinas, or if there is, that we're keeping an eye on it. Ukvinas beis Unyukey. And now we segue into the discussions about cheese. Very interesting. We start now discussing cheese. Tomorrow we will continue to discuss cheese. I would say even the main sugas, maybe arguably, are tomorrow. We're also going to begin tomorrow discussing bread and milk and oil, all sorts of interesting things that are nogea l'maaseh. We're going to see some opinions, I think, of Tosfos, which are very interesting, though we are not going to get, those are really more tomorrow, but we're sort of segueing in to the cheese discussion. It says, the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, Gvinas beis Unyukey, that when it comes to the cheese from the beis Unyukey, this beis Unyukey cheese, Reb Meir says that it is also even ba'ano, right? Asurin, v'isurin isur ano, divrei Meir, v'chachamim ein isurin isur ano. The Chacham said you can't eat it, but you can get ano from it. Now, Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, Rish Lakish mipnei ma asu gvinas Unyukey. Why did they ban this Unyukey cheese? The answer is mipnei sherov agolim shel osa ir nishchoten avodas kochav. The answer is that most of the calves, and I think the point is that the cheese, well, at least some of the cheese would have been, we're going to discuss this now, would have been made with the rennet from calves. I don't know much about making cheese, but I guess you can use the rennet of, I don't know, maybe different rennet is different quality, but I guess you can use, it sounds like from the Gemara, you can use the rennet of calves, of sheep, goats, maybe. I don't know who's got rennet, but anyways. So there's a concern that most of the, what do we say? Also, because most of the calves in that city of Unyukey, of Beis Unyukey, are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah. And because most of the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, so that makes their rennet problematic. And that's why they're also. But my area rov agol afilu miut nami, the Gemara asks a very interesting kasha. The kasha the Gemara asks is that, if you remember, it's come up a few times, Cheve, that Reb Meir's opinion is choshish in the miuta. That when there's a rov and there's a miut, right? This came up with with castrados and castradolas, in the context of yibum, to have to be concerned that maybe, that maybe somebody's a castradola. When they get older, right? If they're young, maybe when they get older, they're a castradola or a castrado. So Reb Meir is generally choshesh l'miut. If there's a rov and there's a miut, Reb Meir would not say like, well, let's just go after the rov. No, Reb Meir says choshesh in the miut, and therefore we have to be concerned about the minority. And therefore, the Gemara's question is, why does it have to be that the majority of the calves are, right? Because we're saying the opinion of Reb Meir is that they're also even ba'ano, but Reb Meir also holds choshesh in the miut. So why does it have to be that a majority of the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah? I would think even if the minority of the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, the cheese would be problematic, because we have to even be concerned about a minority. So that is the Gemara's question. My area rov agolim, I'm reading it again. Why are we concerned about a majority of the calves? I feel a miut. Nami, even if a minority of the calves were slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, Nami deha Reb Meir chayes miuta. Reb Meir is generally concerned about mutes. We'd have to be concerned about the minority of the calves. Iyomart rov ika miut. The iyomart miut. Kibdika rov agolim. De'ein nishchad navodas chom ve'ikanam yisha behemis. De'ein nishchad navodas chom have the miuta lo chai shomer. Very interesting answer, which we'll read again in a second, which is actually we're forgetting something. We can't only look at the calves. The calves are just one kind of an animal that you will be extracting rennet from the stomach of the animal. But rennet can come from other animals. I don't know exactly which animals. Maybe, I think sheep, maybe goats. Let's say goats. Let's say goats. I don't know, but let's say goats. So you have calves, you have sheep, you have goats. So therefore, of sort of the general animal pool that you can be extracting rennet from, the cows are a miut within that pool. And if we would say that a minority of calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, well then it's a minority of calves which are already a minority in the bigger context of available rennet. So then it would be a miut of a miut, and Reb Meir is not choshesh for a miut of a miut. But if you say that a majority of the calves, well then we can basically treat it as if the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, which is a miut, a single miut of the general pool, of the wider pool of rennet availability, rennet options. And for that miut, we will be concerned. So by saying that it's a majority of the calves, then sort of the calves we have to be concerned about Avodah Zarah. And therefore, because there's a concern about the calves, Rabbi Meir would say that's why all of the cheese from Beis Unyukey is Aser Ba'ana, because we're concerned, even though, yes, there are other options, but since the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, we're choshesh in lemiyut there. But again, if it was a minority of the calves, then it would be a minority of the calves, which is already a minority in the bigger context of rennet options, and then it would be a miyut of a miyut, and choshesh in lemiyut achamiyut. So again, I'omart rov ika miyut. So if you say that a majority of the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, well then you actually have your miyut in the larger context of available rennet, right? We're saying that the calf availability is Avodah Zarah, but that's only a miut of the broader availability of rennet. Avo, ella, I'omart miut. But if you say that it's a minority of calves, well, kevin the ika rov agolim de einish chotin avodas chum. Well, in that case, a majority of the calves are not slaughtered for Avodah Zarah. A majority of the calves are mutter. Vikanami shar behemoths de einish chotin avodas chum. And then outside of the calves, you have the rest of the animal options, which are also mutter and not slaughtered for Avodah Zarah. So Havale, well, if that's the case, that we're talking about a miut of calves, then that miut of calves is actually miuta de miuta, a miut of already, right, calves which are already a miut of the larger pool of animals. So then, the miuta lo chayish, and Reb Meir is not concerned about a minority of a minority. I hope that made sense, friends. Reb Shimon ben Eliyakim le Reb Shimon ben Lakish, so Reb Shimon ben Eliyakim to Reb Shimon ben Lakish, ki nishchotin lavodas kochav mai havi. Oh, so Reb Shimon ben Eliyakim asked an interesting kasha to Rish Lakish, and he says, so what? Says to Rish Lakish, he says, so what? Rish Lakish, who cares if the calves are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah? Beha atu dishari. But Rish Lakish, don't you hold that even if the calves were slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, they would still be permitted? The idvar, because it was stated, Hashoichet ezabehema lizrog damal abadis kochav. If somebody slaughters an animal with the intention to throw the blood, to do zrikas adam of the animal for Avodah Zarah. So the shechita was not for Avodah Zarah. Right? There was no intention of Avodah Zarah for the shechita. But there was intention during the shechita that the zrikas adam would be for Avodah Zarah. Lahaktir chelbol avodas kochavim. Or that the fats would be burnt for Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura. Rabbi Yochanan says that's a problem. It's also because kasav b'chashvin me'avoda la'avoda, because you could have a machshava during one avoda for another avoda, and therefore, since doing the since during the Shechita, there was intention that the Zrika was going to be problematic for Avodah Zarah, so therefore already from the Shechita, it is possible. It's also bano. In this case, it's for Avodah Zarah. And we learn out chutz from pnim. What's pnim? Pnim is like korbanos. That by korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, there's a concept of pigul. Pigul is, for example, if you one example of pigul is that if you slaughter an animal with the intention that you're going to, let's say, eat it outside of its allotted time, right? Let's say korban shlom, you have 2 days to eat it. You're planning to eat it on the 3rd day, right? That would be pigul. So therefore, right, if you do one avodah, right, if you slaughter it with the intention of eating it outside of its proper time, so that's pigul, it's a problem. So, and we say that just like by korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, this is a problematic thing. So also, sacrifices outside of the Beis Hamikdash, for example, Avodah Zarah, where isn't happening in the Beis Hamikdash, but somebody's slaughtering in some location an animal for Avodah Zarah, we would apply the same concepts and saying that if he slaughters the animal with the intention to do Zrikas Adam for Avodah Zarah, that would be a problem, right? And we learn out this external slaughtering from slaughterings that happen in the Beis Hamikdash. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Omer, and says Rish Lakish mutares, that actually this animal would be permitted because we wouldn't say michashme avodah lavodah and that we learn out chutz mipnim. So therefore, Reb Shimon ben Eliakim's question to Rish Lakish is, Rish Lakish, who cares that in Beis Unyukey they slaughter their calves for Avodah Zarah? Slaughtering the calves for Avodah Zarah apparently is not a problem, but Omar le Teraminach Shaitoch, Rish Lakish says to him, you should have like good luck. What does Rashi say? Teraminach Shaitoch, your mazalcha, your mazel, your vibes should be lifted up, should be great. You're a great guy. Be'omer be'gmar zvicho ovda. Rish Lakish says Eina chinami. Eina chinami. I think Tosfos Taka also says that kind of. It was a good question because the default is not that the shechita would be for Avodah Zarah, but that the zrikas hadah, right? That the dam or the chaylev would be considered the main part. So generally speaking, Reb Shimon ben Eliakim was right that generally, it wouldn't be the shechita that would be for Avodah Zarah. It would be the dam or the chaylev or the chaylev. But Rish Lakish says in this particular case, it was when he was finishing the shechita, which is not usually done for Avodah Zarah, but at the end of the shechita, he said, I want this to be for Avodah Zarah. So already as part of the shechita already, he was doing that for Avodah Zarah because the shechita itself that he was doing was for Avodah Zarah. So therefore it is a, since the activity that he was doing, it's not mechash min avodah l'avodah. It's not that like he was doing the shechita with the intention of the zrika being for Avodah Zarah. No, the shechita itself, he wanted to be for Avodah Zarah. So therefore, it was a problem. So that's why Rish Lakish says that in this place of Beis Unyukey, majority of the calves that they would slaughter with the intention of Avodah Zarah during the Shechita itself. Therefore, they were asurim, and even though, yes, there are other animals that they can extract rennet from, but that would be a minority that Reb Meir would be concerned about, and that's why he says it's also even ba'ano. Chevra, we're going to end Daf Lamed of Masechta Avodah Zarah here, and tomorrow we will get deeper into the discussion of non-kosher cheese and also move on to other things as well. That was Daf Lamed Dal Masechta Avodah Zarah. I hope that my efforts to avoid umming wasn't too detrimental. Hopefully it was actually positive, and hopefully it will be positive. Akoponim, we had started off Daf Lamed Dal with very interesting stuff. We had that anecdote of Rabbi Akiva / Mar Ukva who went to Ginzak, and we talked about Misanin Lishos, and we talked about leaving out earthenware vessels for 12 months in order to remove whatever Yei Nesech was there. And we learned that Moses served during the Shivas Yemei Miluim in a white outfit without hems. We talked about pits and peels during the first 12 months versus after. We talked about Mooryis and different types of Mooryis, some of which are actually permitted. And then we segued into our discussion of cheese and what was unique about this base Mooryis and why that was a problem. We talked about miut or Choshishin Lemiut, according to Mary. Interesting stuff. I hope you enjoyed Daf Lamed Aleph of Masechta Avodah Zarah. Peace out.